Wow, Orca, thank you for ruining my immersion. Welcome back, everyone, to part 2 of our Enhancing and Fail Stacking Guide. If you haven't yet seen part 1, I'll put a link up in the corner so you can check that out if you want to. There's still a lot to cover in part 2, so feel free to check the description below for a table of contents. That will tell you what's going to be in this video, as well as provide you with some clickable shortcuts that you can use to jump around the video and look for something in particular. We're going to start off by talking about accessories, which is perhaps the most difficult and frustrating form of progression that the game has to offer. The basics of accessories are pretty straightforward. You put the accessory that you want to enhance over here on the right, and you put the same kind of accessory over here on the left. So if you're using a Bares necklace, then you have to use another Bares necklace. And then you smash them together and see what happens. The one on the left will always get destroyed no matter what. The one on the right will either go up by 1 or it will get destroyed as well. If you're upgrading a higher level accessory, then you don't have to use another higher level one. So for example, if I'm using a +1, I don't have to use another +1. I can just continue to use the base necklace and go for +2. So it's pretty straightforward. You smash these together, and in this case, they both got destroyed. Keep in mind, you do lose these permanently. They don't go backwards, they don't take damage, nothing like that. They just get completely destroyed, and there's no way to recover them. So in that sense, enhancing accessories can be very difficult and very expensive. So now that we understand the basics of how to enhance accessories, it really just comes down to deciding how many fail stacks to use. So we need some way to value our stacks versus the value of the items that we're potentially blowing up when we make these attempts. And in order to do that, I've developed a chart based on the original fail stack chart. So here's the original one. If you go down to the bottom, 16 through 20, these are believed to be the chances for PRI, Duo, Tri, Tet, and Pin for accessories. So you can see, for example, the maximum number of stacks you can use for PRI is 25, the maximum number of stacks for Duo is 35, and so on. So if this chart is correct, and we don't know if this chart applies to accessories or not, remember the chart was originally made for weapons and armor. It's just kind of an assumption that it applies to accessories, but we don't really have anything else to go on, and it seems, for the most part, according to my experience and the experience of friends and guildies, it seems like a pretty good tool to use, so we're going to keep using it. And what I've done is I've converted those percentages into average attempts, so it's a little bit easier to read and figure out how to value. So for example, if the chart tells us that we have a 50-50 chance, then I've marked that down at 2 attempts and put the number of stacks necessary to reach that threshold. If the chart tells us that we have a 20% chance, then I have a little row there that says 5 attempts and tells you how many stacks at each level we need to reach that point. So if you look at the 5 attempt row, you can see that in order for a 20% success chance on PRI, we would need 3 stacks. For a 20% success chance on Duo, we would need 17 stacks. And then if you just go left to right along that row, you can see how that works. The chart at the bottom there will tell you, according to the current armor and hard prices, as well as just kind of my opinion of what a fail stack is worth based on how often you're going to lose your stacks and so on. So you can use that chart at the bottom to see what a fail stack is worth. I'm going to put a link to this in the description. I recommend that you guys make a copy of this, and eventually, once you get a little bit of experience, change those numbers on the bottom chart just to match up to whatever fail stack method you're using. Some people don't necessarily value stacks the way I do. Some people think that they're worth more than this, some people think that they're worth less. This is just a ballpark range for you to use when you're starting off and you're new to fail stacking and you want to know about how much you should be considering each stack to be worth. So basically, the strategy here for enhancing accessories is going to be pretty straightforward. We look at how much silver we are risking when we make our enhancement, and then we are comparing that to how much money we're spending on the fail stack, and seeing if it's worth it, seeing if we could use a lower stack, seeing if we should use a higher stack, and so on. Now, before we talk about specific items and go into examples, I do want to discuss one theory, which is that green, blue, and yellow accessories have different enhancement rates. So this is a very popular theory, and we actually have a little bit of in-game evidence that tells us whether or not this is true. If we look at a green item, such as the Bares necklace, we can look at how the market multiplies the value of the item and use that as kind of a predictor for how many of the items the game thinks that we're going to use to make each level. So the multiplier here goes 3 for PRI, 11 for Duo, 35 for Tri, 80 for Tet, and then I believe it's 150 for Pin. So that's how these values get multiplied, and that is theoretically how much base necklaces the game expects us to be using to reach all of these levels. So if we go now to a blue item, such as the Witch Earring, you would expect that these multipliers would go up, right? If the Witch Earring is more difficult to enhance than the Bares necklace, then you would think these would be higher values, but in fact the multipliers are the same. It still goes 3, 11, 35, and so on. So at least according to the market, it seems like, relatively speaking, we should be using the same number of Witch Earrings to get to Duo or Tri as we would use Bares necklaces to get to Duo or Tri. And now, even if we look at yellow items such as the Ring of the Cadre Guardian or Monos accessories, you can see that the multipliers for many yellow items are still the same. It still goes 3, 11, 35, and so on. There's actually only 4 items in the entire game that use different multipliers, and those are the Ogre Ring, Basilisk belts, Sicil's necklace, and the Ring of the Crescent Guardian. And these go 3, 9, 25, and then back to 80 and 150 again for Tet and Pin. So, very strange. PRI, Tet, and Pin uses the same multipliers as other accessories, but for Duo and Tri, these items actually have lower multipliers than a blue or green, or indeed any other item in the game. It's almost as if the game is trying to tell us that there's a way to use less Ring of Crescent Guardians to get to Duo and Tri than we would need if we were using Witch Earrings or something else. Now, one explanation for this is that the game perhaps expects people to use more fail stacks on average when doing their Crescent rings than when doing their Bares rings, but I don't really think that holds up. I mean, people are already going to be spending way more fail stacks on Witch Earrings than they would on Bares accessories, and yet you don't see any dynamic pricing here. You don't see any difference at all. So it's very strange that only those 4 items would be different, especially since there are other items that are just as expensive as these. Is if you look, for example, at the whale earring or the calc earring, you know, those go for up to 45 million, and yet they don't have different multipliers either. So I don't really think that it has to do with the game anticipating average fail stacks or anything like that. I think if that was the case, we would see more dynamic pricing. I do think this might be a hint that you can actually use more fail stacks when going for Duo or Tri on these items. Now, this is totally a guess. I have no proof to back this up. This is just me giving you guys my opinion. I think that when it comes to these 4 particular items, if you want to go above the fail stack cap for Duo or Tri, then you should do it. And when we look at our accessory chart here and we value go overstacking for these items, we can see that it's clearly worth it. So for example, the Crescent ring costs 40 to 45 mil in today's market, so that's about 80 to 90 million per attempt for PRI. If we look at the amount of money that we would spend on a 25 stack, it's only 20 to 30 million. So if you want to go over the max for PRI, then I think you should feel free to do that. And I think since duo and tri have different multipliers, you should be even more inclined to go over the caps for those. So for a duo crescent ring, the max according to the chart is 35 stacks. If we look at the value of a 35 stack, somewhere around 80 to 100 mil in my opinion, you're going to be spending 200 mil or more each time you go for a duo crescent guardian ring. So if you want to go beyond 35 stacks, if you want to use a 40 or even a 45, I think that's totally reasonable. And same thing with tri. If you want to go above the max of 44 stacks for tri on these items, I think that's a pretty good idea. But again, there is no actual proof to back that up. That is just me giving you guys my opinion. So for the ultra expensive special items in the game that we mentioned there, feel free to go above the cap. For everything else, the process is fairly straightforward. You just want to take the value of whatever attempt you're making and compare it to the number of, or the value of the stacks on this chart here. So let's take a look at witch earrings. Let's say we're going for a duo witch earring in this example. So we're going to be smashing a base witch earring with a PRI witch earring. If we can buy the PRI at 37.5 and we can buy a base at 12.5, that's 50 million per attempt. So if we bring up our chart here and we go down and see at the bottom end where 50 mil lies, it lies right around 30 stacks. So let's see if that makes sense. We know that we can get a duo witch earring in 4 attempts on average if we use 23 stacks, and we know that we can get it in 3 attempts if we use 35 stacks. So in order to save ourselves an attempt, in order to save ourselves 50 mil, we would need to go from 23 stacks to 35 stacks. So is that possible? Let's look at the chart down below. A 23 stack is probably worth between 15 and 20, and a 35 stack is worth 80 to 100. So we're talking about spending an extra maybe 60 or 70 million to save that last attempt. In this case, it doesn't seem worth it. So I would not go all the way to 35 stacks. I would stop, like I mentioned a minute ago, I would stop probably around 30. That would make it so that we get this on average around every 3.5 attempts. If you want to stop even in like the high 20s, you can kind of look at the math and min-max it if you want. Or like I said, if you just want to do this the quick and easy way, just look at the value of the item, look at the value of the fail stack, and match them up. So in this case, a 50 mil attempt means that we want to use a 50 mil stack. And if we look at how many attempts that's going to save us, it does seem to work out. So let's look at another example, because I know this can be a little bit confusing. Let's go through this a few times, see if we can make some sense out of it. Let's look at red coral earrings. These are a little bit less expensive than witch earrings, so we've got a little bit more leeway as far as the chart when it comes to determining the value of this item. Let's start by measuring a PRI attempt. So we've got, these are about 4.5 million, so 9 million that we're spending each time we make a PRI attempt. Let's bring up our chart here. 9 million is equivalent to about a 15 stack, maybe even a 20 stack. So in order to save ourselves an attempt in that threshold, 3 attempts is 12 stacks, 2 attempts is 23 stacks. So the question is, if we're spending 9 million to pry these, can we go from 12 stacks to 23 stacks with less than 9 million? And in this case, I think probably can. Maybe we won't go all the way to 23. Maybe we'll stop in the high teens, somewhere around there. And you know, maybe like 16 or 17. That's probably where I would do a PRI red coral earring attempt. Now, if we're going for duo, we would be spending again 4.5 for the base and then 14.5 for the PRI. So now we're talking about a cost of 19 million, or 19 million that's at risk. So let's go over to the duo column, and a 19 mil stack again is worth, or 19 million. If we spent that money fail stacking, we would probably end up with about a 20 or a 25 stack. And now we're in the same situation that we were in earlier in the video with the witch earring. We know that if we get to 23 stacks, it'll be 4 attempts. If we only use a 17 stack, it'll be 5 attempts. Can we go from 17 to 23 for less than 19 million? Yeah, for sure. So we should go for 23 stacks in this case. Now the next question to ask is, can we go from 23 to 35 for less than 19 million? And in that case, the answer is clearly no. In fact, I don't even think we could get an extra half attempt here. I think just stopping at 23 when going for a duo red coral earring is probably fine, maybe 25. If you go any higher than that, then ultimately you're going to end up spending more money fail stacking than you will save by reducing the number of attempts that you make. So by now, you've probably noticed that based on the money that we're spending on fail stacks, for the success chance that we're getting in actually making these items, the market's multipliers that we mentioned earlier, 3, 11, 35, actually seem quite low. And you can see that the behavior of the market reflects this. So even though, for example, there's a bunch of red coral earrings for sale, all the enhanced ones are sold out, and there's a good reason for that. I do recommend that if you can find one of these already enhanced, depending on what accessory it is that you're using, if someone else enhances it and throws it up there, it's a pretty good idea to buy it. If you like gambling, then you can take the shot of making it yourself for less. Of course, you can always get lucky and beat the market price. But overall, I would say that you're better off buying these if you can find them. Of course, you're probably going to have to end up making a lot of accessories yourself just because they're not available on the market, but try to snipe those when you can. That'll become even more apparent in our final example here. We're going to talk about the Bares necklace, and we'll go a little bit more in depth in this one, since this is an item that a lot of you are probably going to be making when you first start the game. I know this was the first necklace that I ever tried to do any serious enhancing with, and a lot of new players will try to take this all the way up to try to get that 10 AP. At +3, the Bares necklace gives you the same AP as a base level Ogre ring, which is worth 95 million. As you can see here, you can buy one of these for 10 million, or we can make it ourselves for probably around 20 to 30, and we'll talk about how we arrive at that cost as we go through this process. Currently, it looks like the base Bares necklace is selling for 200k. The PRI necklaces get sold pretty often, so you can snag some of these if you want. It'll save you some money in the long run buying these versus making the prize yourself. But it's not too big of a deal. If we look at the chart here, going for PRI, we can see that already it's not going to take us 10 or 8 attempts. The base chance is too high. 1 stack will get us our prize every 6 attempts, and 3 stacks will get us our prize every 5 attempts. Now, the value of a fail stack compared to the value of this necklace, if we go for PRI on the Bares necklace, we're talking 400k per attempt. So the question here is, can we go from 1 stack to 3 stacks for less than 400k? And with the current prices, we actually can't even do that. So it's a pretty good idea to start these actually at just 1 stack and use the necklaces themselves to build stacks for more necklaces. So I'll show you what I mean. I have a few Bares necklaces queued up in my inventory here. So starting at 1 or even starting at 0, it doesn't make that big of a difference. We're just going to smash these together, and we're going to use the Bares necklace itself to build fail stacks instead of using blackstones. This way we save money on the stacks, and we can get lucky, and some of these might actually go through before they should. So it looks like we got lucky on the one. We didn't get any luck after that. Once you get up to about 4 fails using this method, I would stop. I think that we're now getting to a point where if we use too many stacks on the item, it's not going to be worth it anymore. If we, for example, let's bring up the chart again. When it comes time to go for duo Bares necklaces, we can see that if it's going to be costing us, here, let's take a look at the market. The base is 200 and the prize is going to be what, 600 or 650? Yeah, so if it's going to cost us like 900k or 800k, depending on, the price here can fluctuate. If it's going to cost us, let's say 800k every time we go for a duo attempt, if we compare that to our duo chart here, and we ask ourselves, can we go from 5 stacks to 11 stacks and save 800k, in this case twice. Since we're at the top of the chart, it jumps by 2 attempts, so be careful with that. In this case, we're jumping from 8 to 6, so we're saving 2 attempts. We're saving not just 800k, but 800 times 2, we're saving 1.6 million. Can we go from 5 stacks to 11 stacks and save 1.6 million? If we go down to our chart, I would say it's kind of a wash in this case. Whether you want to do your duo Bares attempts at 5 stacks and fail more often, or whether you want to spend extra money to get a 10 or 11 stack and then and then do it that way, you're pretty much going to break even. So depending on how broke you are and how much you're trying to min-max this, we could have started going for duo necklaces with the 4 stack from the other character. In this case, if you are new to the game and you're trying to get as much value out of each individual stack as possible during this process, I would say save that 4 stack, go use that on like a mid-level upgrade on your Gunnar armor or something. Get another character who is actually somewhere in that 5 to 11 range. In this case, I've got a character with 6 stacks, and we are going to just be smashing Bares necklaces together until we get to about plus 11. That was our stopping point that we determined. Again, we can just review quickly. If we get up to plus 11, then we are saving ourselves 2 attempts. Pushing from 11 to 17 no longer seems worth it, just because we're only risking about 800k per attempt here. So obviously we can't go from 11 to 17 stacks for 800k. That's not possible. But we can go from 5 stacks to 11 stacks. Anywhere in that process here, if you look at the math and compare, you're going to find that it's going to be worthwhile. So let's just start at 6 here and smash some of these together and see if we can get some luck. What did it say? This was going to be every 6 attempts? Okay, so then about 4 attempts in, we got it. And now that we have the duo, the process is going to change just a little bit. Remember I mentioned earlier that the market tends to undervalue these items. So if we look at the value of a duo Bares necklace, the market says that this is worth about 2.5 million. So if you can buy this at plus 2, definitely buy it. If you watch the process that we just went through, we certainly spent more than 2.5 million. Let's think about it. So we got, I would say, pretty average luck in that case, maybe even a little bit above average. And we spent 800k for these first 3 fails. That's already 2.5 million. Plus the money that we spent on the duo attempt, and then the million or 2 that we spent before that making the prize to get this to happen. So we've already spent probably about twice as much as what the market says this item is worth. Instead of spending 2.5 million, we've probably spent something like 4 to 5, which not only reinforces the argument that you should be buying these if you can instead of making them, but it also opens up the opportunity to use something called Cron stones. Cron stones are these little bluish spheres that you can buy from any blacksmith for 1 million silver each, and these will allow you to prevent an item from exploding if you fail an enhancement. You have to spend the market value on Cron stones in order to protect an item. So for example, if we want to protect a 30 million silver item, then we have to use 30 million silver worth of Cron stones in order to protect it. So in that sense, it's kind of like buying a backup, except Cron stones have a few disadvantages that makes buying a backup generally better. The first disadvantage is that we lose our Cron stones even if the enhancement succeeds. So normally if we were using a backup and our enhancement succeeded, we would just already have that backup there. We could go for another enhancement. We wouldn't lose anything in the process of succeeding. But with Cron stones, even if we succeed, we spin the stones, so it's kind of like losing the backup either way. The second disadvantage is that if we fail, we don't gain any fail stacks from using Cron stones. And the third disadvantage is that even if we protect an item, it still has a chance to go backwards by 1 level. So the item won't completely be destroyed, but it is possible for a +2 accessory to fall backwards to a +1 accessory if we fail using Cron stones. I don't know exactly what the odds of that happening are. The number that gets thrown around pretty often is that you have a 70% chance to stay the same and a 30% chance to fall backwards. I have no idea if that number is true. I just know that a lot of people like to quote that statistic. I haven't quite done enough Cron stoning to verify that myself, but who knows? Maybe they're right. But like I said, because of these disadvantages, it is generally better to just buy a backup for the item. Unfortunately, some items are rare enough or hard enough to enhance that buying a backup from the market is not going to be viable, and so in that case, with those very rare items, when you can't get your hands on a backup, Cron stones do become sort of a lesser option that you can use as a result. Now, the other reason why you might want to use Cron stones is if the market cost is far below the item's true value. So this happens a lot, especially with lower end accessories. We already talked about how the Bares necklace, the market price for this is very much lower than the true value of the item. This isn't as much of a problem for more expensive items like witch earrings or crescent rings. For those items, the market value is a little bit closer to the true value of the item because people generally use more fail stacks. For these, since we're playing this weird game of min-maxing fail stacks and trying to hit that sweet spot, we're failing on Bares necklaces a lot more often than we would be failing on witch earrings, and as a result, the gap between the way the market values the item and the actual cost of making it grows significantly. So in this case, we already talked about how with a pretty lucky attempt, we were able to make a duo Bares necklace for about 4 to 5 million. With more average luck, I would say based on 200k Bares necklaces, you can probably make a duo Bares neck for about 6 million, which is something like triple the current market price. So triple is a pretty big gap. In that case, I would say it's definitely worth looking at Cron stones as an alternative. Even if the true cost of the item is double the market value, I would say Cron stones are worth looking at. If it's anything less than double, then you're going to kind of have to look at that and decide for yourself. There's a lot of factors that you're going to need to vary. One of those factors is indeed what are the odds that the item will go backwards for Cron stones. You know, if it is 70-30, then we can try to math that out. But since we don't really know that, I would say a safe bet for now is if the market value is less than half of the true cost of the item, then it's a pretty good bet that you should be using Cron stones to protect it. So in this case, we've established that a duo Bares necklace costs 6 million to make. Since the market only values it at 2 million, it's definitely worth using Cron stones. And in addition to that, there's another benefit that we get for this very specific item that is pretty interesting. Since we're right around that 2 million threshold, the duo Bares necklace actually goes back and forth when it comes to Cron stones for whether or not you need 1 or 2 Cron stones. So Cron stones are always in 1 million silver thresholds, which means there's no 1.5 Cron stones. There's no way to value this at 1.5. According to the game, the Bares necklace, as far as Cron stones are concerned, is either worth 1 million or 2 million, and the game will round down. So this makes it really useful for these items that are right around that 2 million range, because if we enhance this at the right moment, when the price of Bares necklaces is low, you can see right now it only actually costs 1 Cron stone to protect it, even though the market values it at almost 2 million silver. So on the left here, these numbers are kind of small, but you can see it says 14/1. 14 is the number of Cron stones that I have in my inventory right now, and 1, that number on the right, is how many Cron stones I need to spend in order to protect this. So normally we would be risking 6 million silver every time we go for try, because that's how much we're spending to make a duo. In this case, we're only spending 1 million silver, Now we do have that chance to go backwards, so we could end up spending more than one in the process, but clearly we can see here that spending 1 million or even 2 million per attempt is better than spending 6. So let's go ahead and click this to protect, and let's see what happens here. I've got one backup necklace in case this does go backwards, but we're using a 15 stack here in this case. Very quickly, let's just go over how we arrived at a 15 stack. It's using the same process as always. This time we're going for try. Now a 15 stack in this case is worth about 6 or 8 million. We've already established that we are spending about 6 million per attempt. Since we're using Cron stones, that actually drops quite a bit down to 1 million per attempt. So the question here would be, can we save 2 attempts worth of money if we went from 15 to 23 stacks? In this case, going from 15 to 23 stacks is going to cost us an extra roughly, I'm going to say 10 to 15 million, and that just doesn't seem like it's worth it to save an extra 2 attempts. Since these attempts are pretty cheap with Cron stones, we're just going to stay right here at 15. If we weren't using Cron stones and we were spending the full-blown 6 million each time, then we could reevaluate that. But for now, 15 is a pretty good number to use. Unfortunately, this only gives us about a 1 in 8 chance for success. So let's see what happens here. We failed the first one, but it didn't go backwards. Failed the second one, and it did go backwards. So there you see the disadvantage of Cron stones. We have one more backup. Let's cross our fingers here. Remember to click that protect button. Don't accidentally leave it unchecked. I have done that in the past and regretted it. Okay, we failed again. And I mean, we kind of expect that we're going to fail this many times, but who knows? Maybe we'll get lucky. Yes! Okay. There is the PRI Bares Neck. So it took us 4 attempts and 1 backup neck. I would say we got pretty good luck there. If we wanted to average out our luck, it might take more than 1 backup necklace. It might take as many as 3 or 4 duo Bares necklaces that you're protecting with Cron stones. If we are getting this at an average of 8 attempts and it's going backwards, you know, 1 out of every 3 times. So it's up to you. You can get your backups ready beforehand, or you can just YOLO your main attempt, and if it fails, you can work on the backups later. So let's just briefly review how much we spent on these Bares necklaces. We said when we started that we expected to spend about 20 or 30 million to get this necklace, which at the time was valued by the market a little under 10. So recently someone was able to snag one of these for 7.5, which is about as low as it gets, so congrats to whoever that was. This item usually on the market, from what I've seen, fluctuates around about 9, 10, or 11 million. But since we weren't able to buy one, we had our registration up and we got impatient, decided to just make it ourselves. Let's talk about how much money we ended up spending as a result. We started with 2 duo necklaces, which from scratch cost us 6 million each to make on average, so that's 12 million there. We then spent 4 million on Cron stone attempts to get to that try, so that puts us up to 16. The base necklaces that we spent in those try attempts is just shy over another million silver, so now we're up to about 17 mil. And then if we count the value that we lost from the duo that went back to PRI, that's another few million on top of that, so we're somewhere in the low 20s now, probably 20 to 22 million total that we spent in silver and in lost value going for this try necklace. So we hit the lower end of our prediction, and we did get pretty lucky. You could spend another 5, 10, or even 15 million on this process if you're at the lower end of the luck spectrum there. So 20 if you get lucky like we did, 25, 30, or maybe even 35 if you get really bad luck to make one of these. That gives you some idea of the process for making a PRI Bares necklace. Believe it or not, if you make it this far and you get this necklace, you are ahead of about, I would say, 90% of the people in BDO for that next slot. If you don't believe me, ask your friends, see what they're rocking. I bet most of them only have duo Bares necklaces, so this is something to be proud of, especially if you're a newer player. You'll hold on to this necklace for a long time. don't bother going for Tet. The extra money that you spend going for Tet is not going to be worth it. Of course, buying a Tet off the market is a great idea, but they never ever get posted. Instead of going for Tet on this, go to your other accessories, focus on your rings, your earrings, and your belts, and then come back to the next slot far from now in the future when you're a lot wealthier and you can go for something like a Monos necklace or an Ogre ring for that pure AP. So it looks like our 2-part series is now going to become a 3-part series. I know that I've been going a little bit long on this series in particular, but I hope that the extra details and examples are helpful to you guys. I think they will be, and you can continue to use those shortcuts to jump around if you want. The final segment of this series will go over some miscellaneous things such as costumes, muskets, fishing rods, as well as how to use negative karma alts to downgrade your reblath and militia weapons so that you can get additional fail stacks out of those. If you guys enjoy this content and you would like to support me, there are a couple ways that you can do so. Of course, we've got the Patreon page. I'll throw a link to that in the description and up in the corner if you would like to check that out. Additionally, as a member of Amazon Prime, you can now subscribe to Twitch channels, one per membership for free. So if you have Amazon Prime and you want to throw a subscription to my Twitch channel, you can now do that at no additional cost to yourself. Just visit my Twitch channel, Moreland TV, and I'm very thankful for each and every one of those subscriptions. They really add up and help me to continue to devote more and more time as I kind of put in the work to do a full-time Twitch and YouTube career transition here. Regardless of whether or not you decide to support or to just continue watching, thank you guys for allowing me to be part of this community and for continuing to check out my guides. Much love, everyone. I will see you next time.